going to hand it over to Rella Abernathy, who's going to introduce our morning keynote.
So good morning, everyone. So yesterday, several times, when our speakers were talking about butterflies and bats and hummingbirds, the issue of the impact of agriculture came up over and over again as a major driver of biodiversity collapse. And I kept thinking, I can't wait till you guys hear Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, who's our keynote today, who's going to show us a path forward to healing our land and restoring biodiversity. So as Adrian said, this is the 10th year of the summit that started here at CU Boulder, at SEEK actually the first time. And it's also 10 years since I met John Lundgren the first time in Boulder, where he was here for a conference. And I've been following his work. He's an incredible agroecologist, working on natural enemies and pollinators and soil health, all sorts of really fascinating work. And also including the impacts of our practices on pollinators and all of our health. And so John had started his career as a stellar academic scientist and USDA researcher, and he came upon all these problems that we've been discussing. And he could have stayed in his job and kept piling up the accolades, like getting a medal from President Obama in the White House as an early career scientist. But he could have stayed and kept chipping away at these problems that we're trying to face in a broken system. But instead, he thought, well, how do we tackle these problems? Is there a different way? So is there a different way to do research and make the change that we need in the urgent way that we need to make it? So what do you think he did? Do you think he stayed in his career? Or do you think he tried something totally new, took a leap of faith? Well, he's here, and he did something totally new. So he started the Ecdysis Foundation as a way to do independent research in agroecology, and he bought Blue Dasher Farm in South Dakota, where he's been able to have other scientists and postdocs and students come and learn from farmers and how to actually do this work. And they put together the largest scale study I have ever seen, the 1,000 Farms Initiative, which John's going to tell you about today. So there are two things I'd like for you guys to keep in mind. One is that there is hope, and John's going to show you the path forward where we can do, at scale, anywhere and everywhere, regenerative agriculture. And I also want you to keep in mind this is one person's idea that started all this. And so, and when we're thinking about what all of us in this room are doing to try to restore biodiversity and heal our planet, it starts with each of us in our yards, our neighborhoods, and our cities. Just like John has learned from farmers, we're all learning from each other. So with that, I'm so excited for you to hear about the 1,000 Farms Initiative and the way that we're transforming agriculture.
Well, that was far kinder than I deserve. Yeah. Let's just jump right in. Geez, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years ago, the beekeepers had me speaking at their national meeting. I got up on stage and I started the talk by asking, when did your bees start dying? 2006, 2008. Yep. Since that time, how much money have we gotten in order to study the bee problem? Millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. And I asked them, how's your bees do last year? And the room got real quiet. How'd the bees do that last year? Because we've at least doubled that amount of money and those resources. How's it working? I think this is a question that we need to ask ourselves in many aspects of our lives. How's it working? We were never going to solve the bee problem because it was never a bee problem. It's a soil problem. It's a diversity problem. And unless you treat it as such, I don't care how much money you throw at it, the bees are going to continue to die. Friend of mine, she lives in Montana. She said, John, the white-tailed deer population and the hunter-killed deer there's weird things happening in the deer. 70% of them from our community have genital deformities in the males. The rest of the deer have these weird jaw deformities that we've never seen before. Has anybody here heard of neonicotinoids? She was curious whether or not there was any implications or connections between neonicotinoid exposure and these white-tailed deer health problems that they were starting to observe. We started a graduate student, her name was Elise. This is a very difficult study to run. It will never be repeated again. She fed captive bred deer neonicotinoids. We tested blood, serum, milk, livers, spinal tissue, brains, spleens. The quantity of imidacloprid within the spleen was strongly correlated with many of the fitness responses that we ended up observing in the white-tailed deer. The dead fawns had significantly more neonic in their spleens. The more neonic that we had in the spleens, it was associated with reduced fawn body weight. Okay, they were smaller. They had smaller organs. That makes sense, right? They're smaller organisms at that point. Thyroid hormone levels were disrupted. Is anybody here, anybody know anybody in their lives experiencing hyper or hypothyroidism right now? I got at least 2 on my staff. Fawn jawbone lengths were disrupted. Sounds familiar? Adult activity levels, they were slower. What's a slow deer in the wild? Dead deer, right. John, that's what you force-fed deer. Under captive conditions, of course you're going to demonstrate fitness responses, right? This is what we were able to experimentally generate in these deer. North Dakota, the hunters harvested 300 deer, and North Dakota Game Fish and Park sent us the spleens, and we tested those. They had 3 times the amount that we were able to experimentally generate under controlled conditions. What are we doing? What are we doing? Then they sent us a bunch of predators. Fishers, bobcats, and river otters. This paper's about to hit right now, very soon. 30% of these were contaminated with neonics. Where'd they get it? Where'd they get it? The neonics aren't staying put, are they? They're getting into the soil. They're getting into the water. They're being taken up by plants that were never treated before. In eastern South Dakota, in eastern Colorado, 30% of the land surface is treated with neonicotinoids. 1 corn seed has enough insecticide to kill 164,000 bees. We did the math. Do you think this is getting into us? I think it is. As part of 1,000 Farms, we asked the farmers at the end of the season. We asked them about their profitability, we asked them about their management practices, and we asked them how they're doing. We asked the farmers whether they've experienced any, this is croppers in this case, based on, we can extend that out to about 250, primarily cash grain producers. Allergies, asthma, anxiety, a lot of these are autoimmune diseases, mental health issues. 1/4 of our farmers self-identified as having clinical depression. And then we looked at the data from national statistics, like society at large. We have 3 times the rate in depression in our farmers. We have double the rate of asthma. Then I asked them whether or not they had experienced any Parkinson's or cancer. This was the rates. We're killing our farmers. We're killing our farmers for corporate greed. And I used to think that that was okay, that, just reducing the amount of chemical is enough. It's not enough. I was in Napa, one of the most affluent farming communities on earth, right? $1 million an acre for mature vines. And they asked me to speak. Of one of the farmers, she did a wonderful study. We encourage this. We love this, right? She compared Roundup with grazing and mowing to manage ground vegetation within her vineyard. And her conclusions were that all of these 3 management practices worked effectively, right? They were equally effective. But the Roundup was significantly cheaper. And so we should use that one. And then they gave the mic to me. And I said, let's play this out. Let's do a thought exercise. Let's walk this one down the chessboard a few moves. You're at the end of your life. And you have to look your spouse in the eye. And you have to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought it was my job to save money. I thought that I was doing the right thing. I didn't think that this was affecting us. And now our grandkids aren't around. Right? And I'm sorry. Does that cut it? What are they worth? Are we putting the right value on things? I worked for USDA for a long time, and I played the game according to the rules, right? And then we started to explore some of these issues. The beekeepers kept coming to me and saying that the pesticides were killing their bees, and I said, no, the science is gray, it's not black and white. And they said, come on out and watch our bees die after that corn crop gets planted, and you tell us that that insecticide isn't killing the bees. Boy, that's different, isn't it? That's different than me reading a paper. That's experiential. That's real. And they were right. We started to do the experiments differently, and we showed that they were right. The farmers started to tell me, John, we aren't using insecticides. We're getting just as much yields and probably more profit. I'm like, the science does not support that. Look at our current system. I mean, why would we have such a system if that was true? Come on out and look at it. And I did. And they were right. The USDA then started to suppress our science. That wasn't a part of the agenda. And I was forced to kind of ask that question, how's it working? Right? How's it working? And I quit. I quit noisy. Because scientific suppression is never okay. Not for political reasons. The USDA then asked, this prompted an investigation, and they asked their scientists whether any of them had experienced research suppression for political reasons, and they were very excited about the results. Only 10% had. There's 2,000 scientists within the USDA ARS. That means that 200 other scientists had experienced the same crap that I did, and they didn't do anything about it. That's just the ones that answered the survey. That ain't right. So I quit. I bought the farm, literally. Because I said, okay, we need to rethink maybe how science is being done. If this regenerative ag thing is a thing, we need to be practicing science differently, because the current way that we're doing this is supporting a broken system, okay? And so it forced me, as well as some of my friends, to start asking the question of, okay, what would it look like then? How should science be different if we're going to really try to usher in an evolutionary shift in our food system? And the first thing was scientists have to be farmers and beekeepers. Because, yeah, scientists were never meant to be experts at farming. Boy, that was a wrong turn. We were always meant to be servants. And so we bought the farm. We raise honey as one of our biggest outputs of our farm, as well as lamb, cut flowers. Christina runs now. But it's a diversified regenerative farm. One of the most important outputs of our farm is hopefully the next generation of regenerative agriculture scientists. So I'm sitting at the farm. This was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, 2022. There's tremendous momentum getting behind this regenerative ag thing. Farmers are starting to talk about this. And they're making bold claims as far as what was possible in their operations. Global food policies were starting to pay attention. And they were poised to act, as well as tremendous financial investment. But the problem was, is it real? Why on earth would we believe a farmer? Well, science had a role to play here, right? We could document this. We could try that. We could try to put some hard data behind it to see whether or not what these farmers were experiencing in their operations was replicable and scalable. And so we had to start to ask ourselves as a team, what would a project that would do something like that look like? Well, the answer was that it had to be big. All right? It had to simultaneously investigate most or all of the ecoregions of North America. It had to investigate all food systems. It had to look at farmer-developed best management practices, not something that the scientific community sits behind their desk and comes up with, right? It had to be actual operating systems. It had to simultaneously be measuring with redundancy most of the regenerative outcomes that a regenerative farm is supposed to be producing. And it probably had to develop entirely new technology in order to do that. Who's the best person for the job, or the best people for the job? We ain't the prettiest. We ain't the smartest. We're not the richest, that's for sure. For some reason, Ecdysis attracts incredibly motivated people that want to make a difference. You know, most of my life, and I think probably most of the lives of the people in this room, you turn on the news and you get bad news, don't you? And every day we are bombarded with this. And after decades of hearing about it, we're on the battlefield, bleeding out, tired, and looking up at and squinting at the horizon, just looking for a sign of hope. When I see our staff, I see the cavalry is starting to assemble. And they aren't going to take this lion down. They want to do something. So we trained them. I trained them up into being pretty good scientists. And I sent them across the country. The 1,000 Farms Initiative. That's what, this is where we've been. Over the last 4 years, we've deployed scientific teams from the Blue Triangle to 1,700 farms across North America. Diverse teams. We've currently got replicated examinations of 35 different cropping systems as well as 10 plus livestock systems. The holes in the map, that's where we're going next year. Colorado, we've been working here for 5 years. How many of your farms have we visited? Anybody in the room? I don't know how many farmers are in the audience, is there? 20? We've been on about 120 farms in Colorado so far. Boulder actually was one of our first places. We decided to make a battlefront because there was momentum here, because there was enthusiasm here. And so we've gotten to actually watch farms within Boulder County change annually over the last 5 years. Really amazing to watch this happen. You guys are really lucky. So each of these dots is a farm, okay? They represent a lot of different places, a lot of different systems. At the end of this, I want this map to be a reflection of North America's food system. But it's so interesting because when you look at this map, here I can use a pointer instead of my hand. I am capable of that. When you look at this map, let me see, there it is. We see compartmentalization. This is where most of the nation's apples are grown. This is where almost all of the world's almonds are grown. This is where a lot of citrus was grown. It's now been completely eliminated. 4% of its production from 20 years ago, it's collapsed. That compartmentalization of our food system has led to a very brittle food system. Okay? And the honeybees and other pollinators tell that story well, right? We send them out here, then down to here, then back up to here, right? Each of those dots falls along a continuum. So from wacko regenerative to very industrialized conventional, okay? I can go in 2 minutes. I can walk on your farm, I can ask you 8 yes or no questions, and I can place you along this continuum. And I can make, with some precision, pretty accurate predictions as far as how much organic matter you've got in your soil, how fast the water goes into your soil, how many lady beetles you have, how happy you are, whether you have Parkinson's in your family. Powerful scoring system, very transparent, scalable, easy to use, right? And free. What a concept. For rangelands, it gets a little bit more simple. In some ways, fewer questions, but more complicated ones. Within rangelands, how many animals do you put out there? Okay? Put a lot of animals, move them frequently, and let it rest. That's the most regenerative systems. But the degree to which this happens really scales depending on how much light and rainfall you get. And so we have to contextualize what regenerative agriculture is and how it is defined based on the conditions, okay? Because regenerative ag is outcome-based. It's supposed to do things. And therefore, a regenerative system in one area could look somewhat different than it would in a different one. That's different than the certification programs that you end up seeing about regenerative ag. That's also different than the certification programs that you'll see for many other forms of agriculture, like organic or biodynamic or permaculture is kind of a weirdo. And in a wonderful way. Weirdos are near and dear to my heart. All right. So what are we measuring, or what is regenerative agriculture supposed to do? Number one, it's supposed to fight climate change. It's supposed to put carbon down into the ground. It's supposed to reverse desertification, increase water cycling, or improve water cycling. It's supposed to be increasing the nutrition of foods that are produced. It is supposed to be increasing farmer wellness, profitability, and reduce pollution. But first and foremost, regenerative ag grows life, biodiversity. All of these other things are outcomes of this one, okay? This is something that I have had to learn, that the farmers have taught me over the last 4 years. I was at a farm in upstate New York, talking with some Amish farmers, and I was sitting in his pasture. His kids were out with the sweep nets collecting bugs, and I was telling him all of the things that we were measuring. I'm like, we're going to go deep carbon, we're going to stratify that, tell you what kind of carbon levels and other micronutrient status, physical, chemical properties of the soil. Sounds good. And then we're going to measure water infiltration, holding capacities of the soil. We're going to look at, how much water use is being done. Okay. And then we're going to name all of the bacteria and fungi in your soil. And his eyes got a little brighter. We're going to put names on all of the insects and all of the plants and all of the birds that we're finding out there. This is the largest bioinventory that I've ever seen. I think we've got more than 20,000 species identified from our food system so far. And I asked him afterwards, why did that biodiversity assessment resonate so strongly with you? And he said, well, as part of our faith, farmers are supposed to be stewards of life. And of all of the other people, all the other scientific groups that are coming to my farm and telling me about carbon and everything in my soils, nobody is measuring that life. But that's what matters the most to me. Regenerative farmers, regenerative agriculture celebrates life in all of its forms. Pollinators, 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 right? Why is he talking so much about farming? Because this is the answer. Be they managed or unmanaged. Okay, so does it do these things? We've got hard data. Okay. This is a kind of a complicated graph. This is rangelands. It's based on about 250 rangelands that we've visited across North America. This is conventional. The most conventional rangelands are the bullseye here. The black dots are the percent increase that we're viewing in all of these organismal groups. Bird richness, bird abundance, insect species, abundance, buscular mycorrhizal fungi, general fungi, all of these bacterial groups, plants. Every single organismal group that we've measured on rangelands and croplands responds in this fashion. When you do ecological research, one of the worst things you could do is repeat the study because you get different results. That's really frustrating. I should have quit when I was ahead, right? In this case, this is a weird ecological data where there is consilience in so many different facets of it. It really lends credence to the fact that something is real here, that this is going on, okay? We love that life because it does things. But we've had to actually adopt entirely new technology in order to do this. So because there's only so many taxonomists that are out there, how on earth we've actually identified 1.3 million insect specimens over the last 4 years. Who the hell's going to identify all of that stuff? Well, it isn't CAS, it's this machine here. So we've developed image recognition software that takes iNaturalist and puts it on crack. Where we have trained this thing in on 5,000 species, not just the big butterflies and bees, but the little stuff, right? The little gnats and beetles and other critters. And then we give it all away for free. So this is open access. University programs around the country are starting to adopt this. IUCN is starting to consider it as well. It's called BugBox. It's freaky accurate. And then we're also putting ecoacoustic monitors in each of these fields. And we're recording sounds of what's happening out there, okay? And then we've got a hawk ears model. We've adapted that and put it into our research work stream so that it rips the bird song off of that sound file, identifies it, and quantifies the birds within each field. But we want to go even bigger because we want all biological noise next. Right, so we currently have the capabilities of sequencing large quantities of microbial species. That's really cool. It's all behind a paywall to interpret that data. And so we're starting to develop an interface where if a farmer gets sequence data on their microbial communities, this thing will help to interpret it for them. free of charge. We give it all away for free. Carbon. Does regenerative ag fight climate chaos? Okay. This is croplands. This is wheat, corn, soy, that kind of stuff. Based on 210 observations across North America, think of this as 2 soil probes dug deep into the ground, down to 60 centimeters deep. And these are different strata within that. Take-home messages from this graph. The one from the regenerative side means more carbon, okay, within that soil column. That's valuable, okay? That's important, not just because, carbon, give me more money, right? No. Carbon drives the productivity of the system in a lot of ways, the fertility of that soil. Science says, well, we would expect that to happen in the top 15 centimeters. That's where most life occurs within that soil. And it shouldn't happen down here. This is fragile carbon. This is carbon that's in this state of flux, right? It was just taken out of the atmosphere, put down into the ground by life. What happens if you till the ground? Whoop, right back up. This down here is mineralized carbon. It's inorganic carbon. We're showing that management affects carbon levels deep down into the soil profile at rates that science said couldn't happen. The farmers are showing us this, okay? And we would not have gotten this unless we were working on operating farms. If we were to extrapolate these results out to a national level and convert all of our nation's croplands over to fully regenerative practices, what this data suggests is that we could put 2 years' worth of annual emissions down into the soil while increasing life, while increasing water cycling, while making rural communities resilient again. When you look at the next best carbon capture and storage strategy, the results are laughable compared to what our food system is capable of. So if we turned all of the rangelands over to fully regenerative practices, we'd get almost 5 years more. This is selling it short. This is selling it short. Because you know what? Our models are not calibrated for regenerative agriculture. I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think that this is just getting it started. Does regenerative agriculture reduce pollution? We've been working in the state of Washington and in the northern plains of North America, watching farmers growing wheat and seeing whether or not, what happens to those farms in their practices over the 3-year transition period. Without sacrificing, while producing food and not sacrificing profit, these farmers, 90% of them have eliminated all insecticides and fungicides. 2/3 of them have eliminated all fertilizers and herbicides. What would be the impact of that if we were to scale that? Right? If they were to walk down to the co-op and ask them, what should I be putting on my fields? Do you think they'd get that answer? No. No. Huge solution. Huge solution. Unless we get rid of these agrochemicals, the bees will continue to die. Dan Pachenka just finished up his master's thesis. We submitted this. He looked at wheat in Washington, and he decided to look at invertebrate abundance and diversity as affected by the different practices that we incorporate within our matrix score, or our regenerative score. The results of this say that insecticides, if you want to kill bugs, spray an insecticide. But if you really want to kill bugs, spray an herbicide or a fertilizer. That wasn't supposed to happen, was it? We're not regulating these chemistries for their impacts on other groups of organisms, just their focal targets. That's a problem. That's a problem. Water cycling. Most of the nation's honeybees go out to almonds, don't they? And almonds are in the state of collapse. 2 years ago, land value in the Central Valley was $40,000 an acre. This last year it dropped to, I think, $14,000. The investment groups that bought all the land are jumping ship. The water is gone. The Central Valley started as a wetland, and we made it a desert. Every nut that's produced requires 2 gallons of water to grow. Every nut. That's how that happens, right? We measured regenerative production when I first started going out to the almond orchards. I'm like, well, let's do a regenerative almond study. And I was told by the Almond Board and a lot of the research organizations out there, the matrix, they said, soil health won't work here. Get out of the way. So we found some regenerative almond producers that were doing this. They were developing successful systems, and we showed. Infiltration goes up by 22-fold within their soils. They're healing their soils. Cover crops are not a sink. They are a source of water. They start the cycle going again. Regenerative almond producers are reducing their water use by 30 to 70% compared to their conventional neighbors. That's huge. That's how the Central Valley and almond production, or orchard production, or agriculture in general is going to survive out there, by healing that soil. Does it improve nutrition? We are working with the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. This is one of the most comprehensive examinations of food nutrition that's ever been done. American Heart Association, Rockefellers are behind this. Real money. They're developing, or they're quantifying, I think, something like 15,000, 16,000 phytonutrients from food products all over. They've got ionomics, metabolomics, proteomics. They're looking at the dark matter of food. We're also partnering with Ecdysis, which is another company that's trying to do that at a little bit lower scale and probably a little more practical scale. We can tie the ecosystem and the management to how much nutrition is in the food. What we've shown is that wheat production in the Palouse area up in Washington has twice the protein in regenerative systems. They also have significant increases in a lot of these micronutrients, half of them that we measured. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We're trying to figure out how the hell we're supposed to analyze hyper-diverse nutritional profiles. One of the conclusions is that we can say that regenerative agriculture influences the nutrition of food. Now it's up to the nutrition community to say what a nutritious food is. And that's more complicated, isn't it? And much more debated. And so once that decision is made, like, okay, this is the target, I can tell you how to get there. We know how to attain these different nutrient status. Okay, does it increase profit? Does it increase yields? Can we feed the world using regenerative ag? We looked at wheat, corn, soy across North America. We're just assuming that we ate corn and soybeans, which we don't. But what we're showing is that these key cash crops are, the yields from them is equivalent to the national averages that is currently being produced. Okay, that's good, right? That's what we want. The conventional fields produce higher yields. You don't want to know why? Because we're not cherry picking farms to be in this study. We're using best management practices. So the conventionals were actually able to drive up those yields even higher. But you know what? It cost them more to do it, such that the net profitability between these two systems was equivalent. And the highest yielding and the highest profitable fields were actually regenerative. The problem is that we've got lots bigger error bars on the regenerative side than we do on the conventional side. Figuring out why that variance is there becomes a really important part of this whole story. All right. I was in North Carolina. It was hot. I was on soils that day, so I got to dig the deep cores. And we were on a blueberry field. It was a Sunday. An old gentleman was running this. It was a beautiful organic blueberry field. He was closed. We were the only ones there, and somebody drove up. I'm like, oh, who's this dude? And he's like, oh, he just comes out. I let him pick. And I'm like, okay, that sounds great. So I dig, and then by the time we were finished sampling this field, it was loaded with people, right? Families with their kids that were out there collecting berries. And I finished sampling, and I walked over, and he's sitting in his rocking chair on his porch, and he's watching the show, right? And he's like, John, come over here. And so I did, and he's like, I got something to tell you. And I leaned a little closer, and he said, John, it's not about the money. Take care of your community, and the money will come. There's wisdom there. There's wisdom there, isn't there? I think we've been sold a bill of goods, right? This is one of those vineyards, right? One of those vineyards. We've been convinced that economic currencies are the most important ones. They are important, okay? We need to be able to make money. But that isn't the only thing that we need to be focusing on. And we need to be elevating the other currencies in our lives to an equal or better status, because that is where we're going to find happiness and peace, all right? We looked at what motivates your management decision. Conventional farmers cite profit, they cite yield, they cite taking over the next piece of ground, right? And regenerative farms, they're not dismissing those items. They want to make money too, but they had a disproportionate value in the health and wellness of my family. That was a really big driver for regenerative agriculture. There's different social drivers, and that's contributing to the variance that we're finding in the outputs in terms of yield and profit. I'll say something a little controversial. The most miserable farmers that I met across the country were consistently cash grain producers. Every year they borrow $850,000 to make $50,000. They are shouldering all of the risk. Their metrics of success have been growing the farm, right? And grandpa and dad were real good at that. And now we're sitting on 10,000 acre farms, and the only thing you could grow on that is more cash grain. They're trapped. They're exposed to chemicals every single day. Their families are. This is broken, right? This is broken. We're now studying how to get out of that mess. We're studying how farmers, and especially in the Western Plains, can transition towards perennial grass instead of traditional row cropping systems. The water's gone. It's been dead a long time. They didn't know it. So is regenerative agriculture real? Does it deliver on these promises? Yes, but it's more complicated than I understood. A lot more complicated than I understood. This is not a box-checking exercise. There has to be an identity shift. There has to be a cultural shift. That is what we're asking these farmers. That is the biggest barrier that we are asking these farmers to confront. is to change their perception of what it means to be a good farmer. Do you know how hard that is? I could tell you as a scientist how hard that was. Yeah. There's only so many of them that are going to be those ones that like to live on the fringe and stir the pot, right? The early adopters. The rest of them are going to need support. They need to know. I thought that the data was going to be the most important part of this whole thing, right? I'm a scientist. And the data is important, okay? But that's probably not the most important thing. We were up in Maine working with wild blueberries this time, and working with Dell and Marie, and they're elderly. They're in their 80s, and they have worked their asses off their entire lives. They've risked everything to fight against this swell of industrialization that was going to wipe their community off of the map. And they were tired. And they're at the end of their lives, and they just wanted to know that it mattered. That somebody cares. That it wasn't just going to be forgotten. And in drives this caravan of 3 crappy minivans, and it spills out these scientists that think that this is the coolest farm that they've ever seen. And I didn't know how important it was as a scientist, for me just to make these farmers feel seen and heard, that was a part of my job. I don't care whether you're a conventional or a regenerative farmer. I want you to know when we leave your farm that we care about you, that we care about your farm, that we care about your family and the land. That is a much different style of science than the one that's currently informing global food policies. There's a level of connection there, right? I wish I was a whole lot smarter than I am. I wish I had known when I got into this, like a long time ago, that as a scientist, when I'm measuring the beauty and the wonder of this world, the most important tool that I have is my heart. So this is my new definition of what regenerative agriculture is. And there's a lot of farms that are going to be able to stamp on the side of their package, regen, right? Certified. They aren't going to be able to check these boxes. Regenerative farmers farm smaller and better, not bigger and simpler. Boy, there's a lot to unpack in that sentence, isn't there? Right? That means a lot more farmers on the ground. That means changing your identity. That means embracing the fact that I don't need to expand. I can take what I have and use it better rather than growing. Okay? Human feet touch every acre of their farm. One of my scientists and I were driving. He lives in Litchfield, in Minnesota, sorry. And he stopped the vehicle and he pointed at the soybean field. And he's like, John, that field right there, sprayed with herbicides, tilled. It was planted. It had neonics and fungicides on the seed. It was sprayed with another herbicide, flying. It had a fly-on of fungicide, insecticides. It was harvested. It was tilled. It was sprayed again with herbicides. Human feet haven't touched that piece of ground. Only tractor tires. Folks, that ain't farming. That's mining. That's mining. And the mine is dry. It's time to change. They grow food, not commodities, that they put on a rail car and ship across the country for their families and their communities. Because family and community is the only way we're going to solve the bee problem. and they celebrate life. What next? Jeez Louise. Well, we're going to make it the Million Farm Initiative. So these are central aspects of the solution. This is where we're going to be focusing moving forward. Avalanche is our community-led science project. We're going to give the keys to the kingdom over to the farmers. They can start measuring their own farms. And we're going to start giving them an interface where they can upload data into our system. It'll analyze it, it'll contextualize it, it'll also introduce them into farmers that are making change within their communities. And it'll hopefully be a piece to help to drive community development. Science as a community development tool, what a concept, huh? And Project Ignite. We are currently growing. We're going to be globalizing this. I just got back from Ireland a couple of days ago. I'm really tired. We'll be working with self-organized farmers over there. Puerto Rico is in January. We move to Mexico and possibly Australia, where we deploy scientific teams similar to 1,000 Farms, but refocusing more surgically. We know where our current food system is at. Let's examine the future-looking food systems and how we're going to get out of this mess. Perenniality, maximally regenerative, integrated farms, things like that. Yes, every year I start at $0 and I have to raise $4 million. We do this through the generosity of philanthropic groups. I give everything we do away for free. I was talking with a farmer up in Montana. We were in northern Montana in the Triangle, for those of you that know that. It's like their wheat kind of belt, right up on the Canadian border. And I was talking with one of the farmers there, and this is where you can, by the way, this is where you can register farms or whatever or learn more. He was intercropping. He was trying to plant 2 different crops at once in the same place at the same time. That's crazy. And so we went out to study it. And he's like, my dad doesn't buy this, right? My dad doesn't, he's not on board. And I'm like, okay. So his dad happened to come out because, hell, I mean, there's a group of scientists in crappy minivans in the middle of nowhere, not Montana. This is like front page news, right? Dad came out, and I went over and I shook his hand, and I said, what your son is trying here is so special that I sent an entire team of scientists to come out and study your field. That moved the needle. That moved the needle. The neighbor came out, of course, and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, we're measuring this, we're measuring that, we're doing all of this stuff, and at the end of it, he's like, well, this is impressive. I'm impressed, and I'm ready to purchase your organic products. I said, no, that's not. We're not selling anything. And it dumbfounded him, right? Why on earth are you doing this? I got 3 kids at home. Somebody's got to be doing this. I don't necessarily really want to be that guy, okay? But for whatever reason, we've been given some skills and the ability, and I feel compelled to do it. So that is why. We've got to leave this world better. Somebody's got to show these farmers that they're not just a crop to be mined. That's all I got.
Thanks so much. I mean, I don't think we could have a long enough round of applause. We're going to send around a couple of mics here while folks take some mics out. I just want to see a show of hands. How many people are farmers in the audience? A few.
That's great.
How many people grew up on a farm? How many people who grew up on a farm? Farm is no longer there because of industrialized agriculture. So,
No matter how many hands, it's too many.
thanks so much. Questions?
Thanks. Yeah. Got one right here. Yep. Fire away. I'll repeat it.
I have,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Oh, I totally took the reins. I'm sorry.
What do you think is the most beneficial way to get more farms to adopt this regenerative agriculture?
Yeah. What is the best way to get more adoption? That's really important right now. I think, data is, couching this in the right language is going to be really important. Making this a discussion about soil health and data is really powerful. Those are equalizers for some reason, right? For good reasons, but they seem to work. Developing communities and making it experiential. That's huge. So when people ask, if you had a magic wand, John, what would you do? And in order to make this thing stick, and it's like, I would make everybody take off their socks and shoes and walk in a prairie. And feel it, right? With all of their senses, what that's like. Because I can show the data. I can show them numbers, right? And that's what the data is for. It's to connect people to this that are never going to visit. As a person, as a farmer, I can go out into a crop field and my eyes see the green reflectance, and my ears are receiving signals of bird song, and I got bugs bouncing off of my arms, and I'm smelling the plant volatiles, and all of that information is simultaneously going into my head and saying, "You're happy," and I have to try to turn that into a number. That's my job, right, as a scientist, and I better do it right, because if I miss this one and I don't reflect the reality of what it is that I cannot deny that I'm experiencing, then we're not going to move the needle. So that's a heavy weight. Yes, ma'am.
do you have any data specifically about the gluten intolerance
Yeah.
in wheat? And you always hear that in Europe, people don't have that problem with wheat, and just...
It seems like, I run in this space quite a bit. We do not have specific data on, well, we will. So we've identified a lot of the proteinaceous materials in wheat. I have not analyzed that data yet, so I can't really hang my hat on that. I can speak anecdotally. Why can't we eat food anymore? Shouldn't we be able to eat food again? A lot of this, I think, is environmental. I think it is. I think a lot of the agrochemicals that we're using are a direct result, or are directly affecting us physiologically as well as our microbiome in ways that are very complicated. We hope to be able to put some hard data behind that.
I'm curious if you could,
Where are you? There you are.
if you could respond to, there was a book earlier this year, We Are Eating the Earth. I forced myself to read it, by Michael Grunwald. Really attacked regenerative ag, kind of disgusting. Wondering if you have a response or a rebuttal to that. And then I'm also wondering about the co-opting of regenerative ag by big players like Bayer.
Yeah. Number one, I did not read the Lundgren book. Did he write a New York Times deal or something too? There's been a few things saying that we're only going to be able to feed ourselves with CAFOs, which really pisses me off. A lot of the criticisms of regenerative ag are conducted by scientists that have never been on a regenerative farm before. And so it's antiquated data that do not reflect reality. They do not reflect best management practices. So that's a problem. That's how I would refute it. In terms of greenwashing, right now we're at a really interesting time in regenerative ag. And I feel like I'm sitting in the middle and getting attacked by both sides. Number one is there's an incentive to being regenerative, okay? You can market your products for more money and all of these things, right? And there isn't an official definition. And so when I show my graphs up here, there's a whole bunch of people that are like, when I say regenerative ag could help to fight climate change, Syngenta stands up. We do regenerative ag, right? But they're not. The problem is that they're not looking at the definition that we're using specifically. And so we're poised to quadruple the scientific literature in the next year that's based on regenerative food systems that are replicated, define their treatment structure, and are conducted in real world situations, not on a 10 meter by 3 meter plot. And so that's going to be really important. On the other side, there is a whole lot of, within the regenerative movement, there's a whole lot of people that are saying, I was at one meeting and one of the regenerative leaders is like, you see that the energy of the earth is out of alignment and it's leading to the metabolism of crop fields disrupting, and the outcomes of that was a clear succession. First we got cancer, then we had IBS, then we had autism, and now we have too many gay people. And I'm like, he threw in a couple of lost cities of Atlantis in there, and I'm like, what on earth? This is really dangerous, actually. It's as dangerous as the corruption from, large corporations or the greenwashing side. We have to have scrutiny, okay? We have to have self-assessment. We need the scientific process in this. It needs to be clear, it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be communicated. So I view that as part of our job. Yeah.
I assume that keeping managed bees is a big part of regenerative farming, and I'm wondering if you're advocating for treatment-free beekeeping on regenerative farms.
One of my grad students put beehives on regenerative ranches versus conventional ranches in South Dakota. Floral abundance within these rangelands was substantially different. You see the abundance is almost double in these regenerative systems. And she measured hive weights were significantly greater. As plant biomass within these pastures went up, brood rating, so the amount of reproduction within the hives ended up increasing. As the amount of biodiversity went up, the varroa mites went away. Sure doesn't seem like varroa mites the problem, does it? Yeah. Let's heal the ecosystem. Let's rebuild the ship instead of arguing with this managed and unmanaged and native pollinator stuff. Let's stop arguing who gets to live on the lifeboat and let's fix the ship, right? And then we can decide. Then we can decide how bad everybody is and how good everybody is. I don't have slides for every question. I did happen to have this one.
So for farmers who are looking to switch away from things like synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, what types of options in terms of nutrient sources, pest control, etc., are available to them, especially ones that are, part of regenerative agriculture and are both logistically and economically viable?
Yeah. What we're advocating for is for farmers to adopt a system on their operation. And what we find, at least at a small scale, don't bet the whole farm on it in year one, okay? Because it's complicated sometimes. There's a learning curve associated with it. Just like any small business, you have to learn. When you start to heal the soil, when you stop tilling, when you start incorporating biological amendments and cover crops, things like this, that tends to start replacing a lot of the fertility. It also provides incredible biodiversity resources that end up largely reducing your need for managing other sources of pests. That does not mean that suddenly, you know, the world is all perfect, right? There's going to be, it's still farming, right? There's still going to have to be, challenges, but adopting a management philosophy where you understand the downstream effects of your decision making is a really important step in developing those first systems. The other thing is the best resource that's out there. We've asked regenerative farmers, where do you get your resources? You want to know, so the ones they didn't use, this is the data, University Extension and NRCS. Those were the lowest. The ones that were the greatest were Friends and Neighbors, YouTube. We're at a very interesting time right now. We're at a very interesting time. But it says a lot. I think that trust really needs to be restored, okay? That doesn't mean that I'm against universities or the federal system. A lot of colleagues work there that I respect a lot. What I'm saying is that time to reintegrate science into community. I think that would help.
How about another big round of applause?
Thank you.